Welcome to the Plate podcast, where we sit at Jesus' feet until He's formed in us. I am your brother and fellow disciple, Pardon Shagwai. In case you are new to this podcast, our goal is to steer each other to follow Jesus as our sole example of discipleship, but also acknowledging that we will always be students, ever wearing the Plate on our back. This week, we've been looking at a portion of Scripture that details the activities that the first church devoted themselves to do, which is found in Acts chapter 2, verse 42. And I'll read. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. So far, we've looked at the components of prayer and devotion to the apostles' teaching. In this episode, we will look at fellowship and the breaking of bread. And if fellowship is mentioned on such a key concept, or such key concepts such as prayer and devotion to the apostles' teaching, it must be extremely important. So firstly, we'll try to define what fellowship is within the context of this verse. And when you read from verse 46 and 47 of the same chapter, it sort of gives you a flavor or more color to what it's talking about. And it says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. So fellowship is not just a casual catch-up of believers, but on balance must be made up of sharing together, eating together, reflecting brotherhood, coming together with sincere and genuine hearts, authentic connection, and praising God. It's important to note that, just like prayer and apostles' teaching, fellowship also requires devotion. The early church did not meet occasionally, when it was convenient, when they felt like it. It was a continuous, consistent devotion to the body of believers. And this fellowship of believers is an extension of the fellowship with their Father. As John writes in the book of 1 John, he says, "We proclaim to you what we've seen and heard, so that you may also have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ." So as he's fellowshipping with the Father, He's also fellowshipping with these people. The body of believers, or the church, is made up of children of God. So if we are all children of one Father, it must follow that we are drawn to one another as a family. The reason that I pick up my phone every week to call my biological sister is because I'm naturally drawn to her as part of my family. I don't need an instruction or encouragement to do it. Now, these guys in Acts chapter 2 were living in this manner before Acts chapter 2 was written. But their expression of a genuine connection, it came as a result of their devotion to God. It made sense for them to gather consistently with their spiritual siblings. And it's easy for you to be tempted to think, of course they had to meet. Their environment was harsh, so they needed strength from one another. But personally, I would argue that today's environment is even harsher for today's believer to survive on their own. Our reality might not have the kind of persecution they received. It might be different from the first century Christians. But we have lots of external pressures that need the comfort and strength of our spiritual family to keep us on the straight and narrow. And so I'll look at why is fellowship important? What are the benefits that we derive from fellowshipping with other believers? I've spoken to so many people who have left fellowship with other believers for one reason or another. Many of them because of hurt, but some because they feel they don't need fellowship, or life is just happening and other priorities have crept in. If you asked me, can a baby survive on their own? My answer would not be a straight yes or no. My answer would be, alone for how long? If it's for a few minutes, definitely they will. If it's a few hours, probably not. If it's a few weeks, definitely they will not. So I think it's the same with a believer. Going it alone for a short period of time due to circumstances can be manageable. But to survive as a believer alone till Christ returns, I would say probably not. That's not how Christ has designed the church. Jesus has called the church his body or family. And these metaphors, they speak of interdependence. And to be part of a body is to acknowledge that I don't have all that I need. And in return, I also have something that other parts of the body need. The ear cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. And if it thought that way, it does not cease to be part of the body because of that. So the longer that we go without fellowship or without fellowshipping with other believers, the more spiritual malnourished we become. There's a church at Corinth that had so many problems that Paul spent time with and wrote to, including disorderly prophecies and tongues and inappropriate consumption of the communion. We hear there was a young man in that church who had taken his father's wife, a very troubled church. And when Paul comes to it, you see that fellowship was important, because if it wasn't, Paul could have just told them to stop meeting altogether until they were organized. But instead, this is what he does. He writes chapter after chapter, guiding them on what to do when they meet. In fact, one of the consequences for wayward believers in the early church was excommunication. This shows how highly regarded fellowship was, that if you are taken out of fellowship, it was supposed to be something painful. So I'll look at a few actual benefits, maybe 4 of them, of fellowship. The first one is fellowship makes us stronger, or makes our faith stronger. Whether we are new to faith or we are veterans, in quotes, fellowship provides strength. Being around other believers gives us the chance to learn and to disciple one another. Whether we are the ones discipling another person or someone is discipling us, it gives us that chance. And secondly, fellowship provides encouragement. And the journey of faith has so many mountaintops, but equally as many valleys as well. Whether it's a loss of a loved one, a failed exam, a crisis in our faith, we find ourselves in these valleys from time to time. And I've often seen believers take a break from fellowship because they are dealing with life. And I would argue that it is during these valley moments that we need fellowship the most. We need the strength and faith of others to stand with us, be it in prayer or just words of encouragement. Hebrews chapter 3 from verse 2 to 13, paraphrase says, encourage one another day after day. And then third thing, fellowship also reminds us that we are not alone. When we come together with other believers in fellowship, in conversation, in worship and conversation, it helps, it reminds us that we are not alone on this journey. And it's amazing, no matter where you are in the world, when you meet another believer, you suddenly feel a connection. You suddenly feel like you are at home. And that's how God has made it like. We are part of one family. And lastly, fellowship helps us to grow. When we interact from a distance, we keep a facade or a veil, which falls away immediately the moment that we start to genuinely engage in fellowship. And the closer we are, the harder it is to hide sin. And in this way, fellowship then helps us to be more aware of the sin that easily ensnares us. When we are alone, there's a tendency to just provide rationalization for, or justification for our own sin. But when we fellowship with others, there's some accountability with our spiritual family. And Paul uses very strong language when describing people who may not want, or who might want to opt out of fellowship. He says, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, do not neglect meeting together, but encourage one another. What it means is, when we opt out, we are not passively not participating, but we are actively neglecting. Imagine you are part of a team sport, and on the day you decide, I don't feel like it. Your individual choice of not feeling like it affects the whole collective, because you are part of a team, you are part of a body. So we notice that the writer of Acts does not just say they moved from house to house, but they moved from house to house breaking bread. And this expression, breaking of bread, is used in the New Testament to refer both to common meals and also the Lord's Supper. And this is what Corinthians says about the Lord's Supper. Chapter 11, verse 23 to 26. For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night that he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." For these, early believers, these words of Jesus were still fresh in their minds in Acts chapter 2. We're talking about maybe 50 days after his death. So this was not a casual thing, but would be viewed with the heaviness or the reverence that it deserved. So when we take the communion, we must always reflect on the significance of the practice. The bread that we eat, it represents his body that was broken for us. The drink that we take, it represents his blood that was shed for us on the cross. And us as humans have a tendency to quickly forget and take things lightly or take things for granted. So Jesus gave this instruction to make sure that we always remember. And each time that we take the communion, Paul says, we proclaim the Lord's death, that is, we preach the gospel. And also Paul gives some warnings regarding taking the communion and encourages everyone who takes it to examine themselves. For when you take it in an unworthy manner, you will be guilty of sinning against the body and the blood of the Lord and bring judgment on yourself. An unworthy manner would be to disrespect the sacred significance of the communion. At Corinth that I spoke to earlier, the wealthy would eat and drink until they were drunk, while the poor went hungry, causing division and humiliation in the church. And in this, they were neither honoring God or edifying one another when they met. So the focus had moved from celebrating and remembering Christ and to satisfying their own appetites. And Paul gives us this strong warning. Some of you are weak, some are sick, and some have fallen asleep, meaning they have died because of this. So when we partake the communion, we ought to examine ourselves as Paul teaches. If we have any sin in our hearts, we confess it to God and we partake in the communion. And it's my hope and prayer that these devotions of the early church and the examples that they set will also stir us up. And friends, till next time, keep your eyes on Jesus front and back. Stay at his feet, because disciples do not graduate. May God richly bless you.